At the end of 2021, the Hyundai IONIQ 5 came to the Irish market and it took it by storm. In fact, about 2,000 have been registered on Irish roads since then, and that's good for any car, never mind for a fully electric car. Now, on top of that, so far in 2023, the IONIQ 5 is actually the 7th best selling car, and that's not the 7th best selling EV, that's just the 7th best selling car. And today we've come to the K Club in Kildare to check out the all new Hyundai IONIQ 6, which is built on the same platform. However, it definitely looks a little bit different. My name's David OC, this is the Done Deal YouTube channel. If you'd like to subscribe, that would be great. Now let's pull in and take a look at this Hyundai IONIQ 6. Now from the exterior, it is nothing like the IONIQ 5. To begin with, it's a lot lower. It's also a little bit longer and it's just got a bit more of a sleek look to it. In fact, when I stand back from it, I see a little bit of the original Mercedes CLS. From the rear, I think this is the best angle. So you've got the sloping rear roof. Obviously it's got some darkened window, which just adds to it. And then this aero here, 2 spoilers. Things are getting quite wild, but obviously this does pay into the whole aerodynamics thing, which we'll talk about later on in the video. And they actually really do add to it. They make it look even better than a Mercedes CLS. But then it's here, the homage to the IONIQ 5 with the pixelated lights at the rear. They've always been a talking point and they continue to look really, really well on the IONIQ 6. Now we have to take a look under the bonnet. That was first try, I haven't practiced this. Now here there is what's called a fruit or a frunk. It's a front boot and this will depend on size depending on which electric motor and powertrain you go for, and I'll talk about that in a second. But this is brilliant, absolutely brilliant for putting takeaways in because it doesn't stink out the car. And I know that's so random, but this is a real world practical tip. Now in terms of battery sizes, I'm yet to find out, but I'll insert a voiceover in a second because I haven't been to the press conference. But this particular car anyway is a 77.4 kilowatt hour battery and it has a range of 614 kilometers. Now real world, if you can get into the mid 500s, then that is top tier. There also, I think, will be a 53 kilowatt hour battery. The 53 kilowatt hour battery will have a range of up to 429 kilometers, which is pretty impressive. On top of that, all cars come with a 350 kilowatt charger, which is really, really fast. And if you can find a charger, it will allow you to go from 10% to 80% in just 18 minutes. So there's a good few options there. Now personally, my advice is generally go for the bigger size battery because down the line, you're probably going to protect your resale value. On the subject of value, it has a surprisingly low starting price of just 48,295. If you want the larger battery, it starts at about 54,000 euros, which is impressive considering it's got the longest range in the segment. It's also available in 3 trims: Signature, Elegance and Finesse. Finesse will actually come with an all-wheel drive dual motor. Here is where it all matters, because this is where you're going to be spending your time, and the good news is it's a fantastic place to sit. It's very similar to the IONIQ 5, which is a big compliment to this, and it's just a lovely place to be. It's very comfortable. The seat is adjustable electronically. You can also adjust the steering wheel. There's actually a good bit of play within that, which is nice. And then you've got this kind of console built around you, so this big floating cup holder. There's a charge pad. It's very like a Saab, and if you're really into your cars, you'll understand why. There's these window buttons here in the center rather than on the side. I presume that's to make it feel a little bit wider. Obviously the seat is heated, but I actually think, if I check it, it's cooled as well. It appears it is, yes. Very, very fancy. Now, on top of that, the steering wheel, this is one thing that they have changed from every Hyundai ever, which I can imagine is going to be weird if you're coming from a previous Hyundai into this, is the controls for the volume and then the cruise control have actually swapped sides. So it's keeping in line with a lot of European cars. Now, personally, someone who's in and out of cars, I don't notice it too much, but it is just something to bear in mind. Climate control is independent, which is brilliant. It just means you can quickly get to it. And then the system itself here, it's very good. Now, it is a bit of a stretch, but that's because I'm short, probably not really the car. And it all connects up very well. Your phone connects very easily. However, if you want Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, you need a wire. And that's apparently to do with the satellite navigation system. They can't actually make it wireless. I have no doubt that will come down the line, and perhaps it will be an over-the-air upgrade. But for now, you're going to need an old-fashioned wire. I want to talk about the ambient lighting. Like in a lot of modern cars, you can adjust that to a custom color as you please. And then over here in front of you on the driver, you have another large screen which tells you everything you need to know. I mean, the reality is, if you want to play around with these, go to a local Hyundai dealer and go and sit into it, because it's the best way to really get an understanding to it. You can hit the link up there. We've got some dealers all around the country, so find the nearest one to you. But yeah, as a whole, it's a lovely place to be. It's very like the IONIQ 5 in a good way. Anyway, let's go for a drive. Driving, what's it like? Well, given that it's an electric car, I think it would be rude not to put our foot down as we enter an 80 km/h zone. And it's pretty quick. So it's got about 220 brake horsepower and it is nippy. And that's because electric cars are instantaneous. When you touch that accelerator, it's like a light switch. It just goes. There's no accelerating. Now, other things that you'll feel when you first drive it is that it is drastically smaller than the IONIQ 5. Now, it's actually built on the same chassis, but it's just, it feels a little bit smaller. It feels more like a saloon, for example. Now, as you purr along the road, the suspension is very well set up. It's actually quite bumpy here and the road surface isn't great, and it's quite quiet in here. If I speak quietly, you'll still hear me. It's also absorbing little bumps in the road very, very well. And actually the driving position is lovely. I think I spent a little bit of time setting up this seat just to get it right, and I'm very happy with how I have it. On top of that, it's got really good lane assist. It's actually taking this corner nearly for me. That is staggeringly good. It's always been good on all Korean cars, but again, in here, it's very, very good. Another thing to mention, being an electric car, is regenerative braking. Now, you can change this how much kind of regenerative braking you want with these paddles here. So it's not in the infotainment system in some confusing setting. It's just here on these paddles. Click this one and you increase it. And it does have I pedal. Now, I can't do it because there's a car behind me, but it will go completely to a halt without touching the brake, which means you can drive this car with the single pedal, which is just absolutely fabulous. Once you do it for a week, you'll be astonished how little you actually have to use your brakes. Right now I have to take quite a sharp corner, so we'll slow right down, and it just does it magnificently. Now, when you do start getting involved in a little bit of engaging driving, the word is engaging. It's a lot more involving than, let's use the IONIQ 5 again. I'm sorry, I keep going on about it, but on that, you certainly don't feel like you're as much in it as you are here. Everything down to the seating position, but also it just seems to handle a little bit better than not only the IONIQ 5, but then actually quite a lot of cars, quite a lot of electric cars. The power, it's getting better. At first, when I accelerated, it felt quick but not fast. Now I want to talk about that. So what happened there is the speed limit has changed, and this is new legislation. So this is not just the IONIQ 6 that's getting this. This will be in all cars. What happens is when you reach a new speed limit, so there it went from 80 km/h down to 50, it actually beeps at you. It's really, really interesting. Now, it can be switched off, but unfortunately, due to legislation, you won't actually be able to leave it permanently off. So every time you start the car, you're gonna have to turn that off. Now, there is a shortcut button here on the steering wheel, and you could set it up so that that shortcut takes you straight to it, which is, I guess, a nice little touch. But unfortunately, this is the future. Someone's always going to be watching nowadays. But going back to the way it drives, it's a little bit more engaging. As much as I love the IONIQ 5 or the Kia EV6, I think me personally, I prefer to spend my time in here. It's a little bit more driver focused. Bear in mind that I'm also driving the rear wheel drive single motor. It is going to be coming with a dual motor version, which will be all wheel drive and have over 300 brake horsepower. And given that this 228 brake horsepower is very quick, I can only imagine how fast that one's going to be. In terms of the boot, I'm now beginning to see a little bit of Porsche in it when I spend a little bit of time. However, unlike a Porsche, when you click the button there, there's no engine in here, just some new school charging cables. Now, in terms of size of the boot, that's always a big one. So it's 401 litres. To compare that to something that a lot of people might be familiar with, a Volkswagen Golf is 380 litres. So it's definitely not as big as the IONIQ 5, but it's certainly respectable. The entry point, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit disappointed. I was hoping it would have that kind of hatchback style that you get in a sportsback Audi A5 or even something like a Tesla Model S where it opens the whole thing, but it still does suffice. And I do love that you can pull down the rear seats from this lever here, and they split, of course, in a 60-40 split. Under here, there's a little bit of storage for maybe some charge cables, but no spare wheel under there. And yeah, as a whole, it's, I guess, kind of middle of the bunch when it comes to boot space. In the rear, now I don't want to be comparing it to the IONIQ 5, even though that's all I've done this review, but I have to say it's a little bit smaller back here. But that said, loads of knee room. There's a fully flat floor, which means 3 adults in here will be a little bit more comfortable. And also armrest here, drink holders, USB-C charging points, various bits of storage around the place. Headroom's a little bit limited. Now, what they have been able to do is have it dip down just behind the headrest, so you do get more than you think. But if you're 6 foot and you're driving from Belfast to Kerry, you're going to have a sore neck by the end of this trip, or just shotgun the front. Another thing I want to point out is there's a 3-pin socket here, and actually the vehicle to load system is really, really impressive, and we'll talk about that just before we finish up the video. Vehicle to load, what is it? Because it sounds pretty complicated, but I'll try and explain it as simply as possible. It's essentially a way to get power out of the battery in the car and into, let's say, another car or an electrical appliance. So imagine you go camping in the summer and you want a nice cup of tea, you can actually plug in your kettle. So there's a 3-pin socket in the back. And vehicle to load, I think in the IONIQ 5 there was a little bit of confusion around it, but with the 6, it's going to be available in every spec car. Now that said, you will have to purchase an adapter in the lower spec. In terms of price, not exactly sure yet, but it's about 300 euros. So if you need it, it's definitely not unobtainable, but if you don't need it, you can save yourself 300 quid. So that is it for today's quick first drive of the IONIQ 6. I have to say, it certainly looks the part, and from the short bit of driving I've done in it, it does seem really good. If you can get mid 500 kilometer range, it's also going to be very appetizing to a lot of potential customers. If you've got any questions at all, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. We'll do our best to give you a nice informative reply. But for now, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to search for Hyundais for sale in Ireland, then hit the link up there. We've got over 1,000 trust dealerships all around the country. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.